The iPhone 6s and 6s Plus were released on September 25th, 2015 and were the successor to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus.
Hi, welcome to the TC. My name's David, and today I'm going to explain why the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus are so great iPhones in 2020.
As per usual, I want to first discuss the design of these iPhones. Its looks are extremely similar to the iPhone 6, and I actually have them both side by side here. You can see that there are very few visible changes between them. The iPhone 6s has the addition of the S moniker here at the bottom, and looking at the camera you can see that the 6s has a more bluish tint on the lens. Flipping it around, it becomes even harder to distinguish them apart from each other. I'm going to move these around and have you guys guess which is which. Tell me in the comments below if you got this right. Alright, so you can actually tell which is which by looking at the camera once again. The 6s has this bluish tint once more and is ever so slightly larger due to the larger sensor. It's such a small detail, probably not many people would ever notice. So we can see that the design is similar to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. But actually, there's a major structural change that actually makes the body way better. Apple switched the 6s over to the 7000 series aluminum, which added way more strength to the body. This of course was spawned due to the problem of people bending the 6 and 6 Plus because the aluminum was softer and they were so thin. So actually comparing the two, you can see that the 6s and 6s Plus are slightly thicker than the 6 series. One design element that is always going to go down well is the inclusion of this headphone jack, something that is basically omitted in every new smartphone now. I guess Apple went with the if it ain't broke don't fix it approach with the design of the 6s. Although they did have to fix it by making it stronger with stronger aluminum. Overall, it's an okay design, but far from the best looking iPhone. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 for exterior design. Next, let's talk about this display. This was the first iPhone to feature Apple's 3D Touch, and this allows you to press harder into the screen to access more content and apps without opening them yet, or half-open links. However, this is basically completely phased out now, and the entire lineup of iPhones currently being sold don't have 3D Touch anymore. I honestly kinda miss it, but the trade-off for this and newer iPhones is battery life, and I think I'd rather take the battery life over 3D Touch anyway. The sizes for these displays, however, really show their age, as the 6s comes in a 4.7-inch screen and the 6s Plus is 5.5 inches. It's not terrible, but paired with these gigantic bezels, it is cumbersome to use the Plus model, just because you have so much extra space not being utilized completely. Yes, the iPhone SE2 that was released this year uses the same size bezels as the 6s, since it shares the same size screen as the 8, but it still looks pretty dated by today's standards. What doesn't look dated though is the pixel density of these devices. The iPhone 6s runs at 326 ppi and the Plus model at 401 ppi. You might have noticed that the Plus model's pixel density is higher than even the iPhone 11, and you'd be right. The iPhone 6 and 6s Plus both have 1080p displays allowing for more pixel density than the iPhone 11 currently being sold brand new is today. Both of these iPhones feature about 500 nits max brightness, which is fine, albeit a little difficult to see outside. But there are screens that are way worse than this. So although these displays feature those gigantic bezels, I would say that you don't sacrifice on screen quality. I think the inclusion of 3D Touch doesn't make up for the bezels, but these screens are still very usable. I'd rate them about 7 out of 10. Now onto something you've probably been waiting for, the cameras. Surprisingly, they take great photos for 2015. I kid. The iPhone 6s and 6s Plus were the first iPhones to feature a 12 megapixel sensor on the rear, and this significantly upgraded the camera quality on these iPhones. I'd say that it's totally usable today, except in low light. They both feature an f2.2 aperture, and I think that's what really lets these cameras down. Not having more light hit the sensor destroys any chance of taking any good low light photos without any flash, but in good lighting, I think it makes up for that drawback by providing good details and colors. Another thing to consider is that the iPhone 6s Plus also has optical image stabilization, which allows it for much better video quality. Speaking of video quality, we also get 4K video at 30 FPS here for the first time on an iPhone. This allowed for way more detail in a video over the 6 series, and really brings this iPhone into a new era of smartphone photography. My only complaint is the amount of noise you get at night because of that f2.2 aperture. However, I think that it's still really great to have 4K video, and makes using the iPhone 6s really nice even today. Moving on to the front camera, I think the biggest change happened here. We finally bumped up from that terrible 1.3 megapixel sensor from the 6 to a 5 megapixel sensor. This was probably the best change for the camera as it allowed for way more detail and way less noise in photos taken with it. Also, we got the addition of Retina flash on the front, which was okay, but allowed you to take photos natively at night using the front camera, instead of relying on any app that had front-facing flash. The only downside for this front-facing camera was making the video 720p still, but I mean, just flip it around and you got a 4K video camera, so I mean, If I had to give this a rating, I would probably give it a 7.5 out of 10 in 2020 standards. It's not amazing, but for a phone you can probably get for like $100 now, good 4K video is amazing to have. Overall, the cameras on these iPhones are still pretty good, even if they are 5 years old now. But I mean, it's still quite usable being that even the 11 Pro uses a 12 megapixel sensor still, albeit bigger f-stop, larger sensor, better software, but you get the point. If I had to give this a rating, I would probably give it a 7.5 out of 10 in 2020 standards. It's not amazing, but for a phone you can probably get for like $100 now, good 4K video is amazing to have. Okay, now you might think, well wait, the iPhone 6s is 5 years old now. That's absolutely ancient, so it must be extremely slow. And that is where you would be pretty wrong, my friend. The iPhone 6s features the A9 processor, which is probably one of the biggest leaps for processing speed for an iPhone, other than the A6 to the A7, and like the A10 to the A11. But glossing over that, you get a dual-core 64-bit processor that runs at 1.85 GHz, and a hexa-core GPU matches 2 gigs of LPDDR4 memory, and this phone still puts out a punch. Comparing this to the year-older A8 chip and the 6 series, you now get 70% more processing speed and 90% faster GPU performance. I mean, just take a look at the Geekbench scores for this thing, and you'll find it still competes against phones like the Pixel 4 and Note 10 Lite, even beating the Pixel 3 XL and Note 9 in single-core. And when we look at multi-core, it beats... Oh no. I guess the S6 and the Note 5? Okay, so maybe the 6S isn't a multi-core beast, but it does something really well in 2020 that most Android phones from the same time can't. It runs the latest version of iOS 13 like a champ, and it's even going to be getting iOS 14 this fall. Name another Android device getting the latest version of Android that came out in 2015. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that Android phones are still really great and super cool. I mean, they're the only ones still doing super interesting things like foldables and all-screen designs, but if there's one thing Apple does right, it's official software support for their devices. Every now and then, you'll get a stutter, but the iPhone 6s runs amazing still in 2020, and I think a lot of people wouldn't find using this device slow by any means. I think the addition of an extra gig of faster RAM really helped push it over the edge against the 6 series, and it allowed it to stay relevant in 2020. Even the iPhone 8, which was released at the same time as the iPhone 10, has only 2 gigs of RAM, so I don't think it will be a huge problem for the 6S as long as you don't push it like you're using a 2020 flagship. Overall, considering this is a 2015 phone, but still has great performance, I'm going to give performance on the 6S an 8 out of 10. Moving on to something that gets glossed over a lot is the speakers and microphones of phones. Well, the iPhone 6s features 2 microphones, one on the rear and one at the bottom of the device. It's okay and picks up sound alright, but it's only mono audio, which is the drawback of this device. The speaker on the iPhone 6s is the biggest letdown, I'd argue, though since you only get a mono speaker, it's not the loudest, but it's fine. I think that there's so much better options out there for sure, and I think this is probably the worst part of the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus. However, you do get a headphone jack, so I mean, want good audio? Plug in some headphones or use Bluetooth. Because of the mono speaker and the mono audio, I'll have to give the rating for the speakers and microphone a 3 out of 10. It isn't loud and only offers one firing speaker, The mics help build up more points, but mono audio lets it down again. Okay, so battery life with the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus is pretty bad when comparing it to today's phones. With the 6s, you get a tiny 1715 milliamp hour battery, and in the 6s Plus, it jumps up to 2750 milliamps. I would say that the batteries are not the strong suits of this device, and it features batteries that are actually smaller than the 6 and 6 Plus from the year before. I would say that battery life is pretty bad, but I can't completely judge this accurately since mine only has 92% of the original capacity. Just based on my use though, you'd probably have to charge it in the middle of the day to get a day out of it. Overall, I would probably rate the battery a 5 out of 10. I can't give it a high rating based on my own experiences with it, but I also can't go any lower considering I'm not entirely sure how well it would do with a fresh battery. Okay, so there are some parts of the 6s that really help push it over the edge. First off, this was the first iPhone to feature Touch ID 2, and it is so much quicker than the first gen Touch ID. It is also more accurate, and I'd say it even competes with Face ID in speed. I mean, it's being used even today with the SE2, so that demonstrates just how good this is. Next, this was the first iPhone to feature the Taptic engine, which is Apple's proprietary vibration motor. It's really good, and it's what Apple still uses to this day all the way to the iPhone 11 Pro. Of course, each generation received hardware revisions to it, but the 6s was the introduction to it, and the vibration motor on this 2015 phone is top notch, and I think it definitely holds up to this day. Finally, something that Apple did to this phone really would inspire the next generation of iPhones to come. Inside the device, teardowns found multiple gaskets around parts, such as the display and the logic board, which meant that it actually could handle some water. However, this isn't officially supported with an IP rating, but I think that Apple is testing to see how well it would hold up with customers using the devices. As you may know, the following year, the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus had official water resistance ratings, so I think you could see how putting a form of seals in the 6s allowed Apple to essentially beta test how water resistant their gaskets would be in the real world by people accidentally putting their 6s models into water and how well it would survive the dips. Overall, I think these features of the 6s really inspired major revisions for future iPhones, and because of all these being used to this day, I'm going to have to give these features a 10 out of 10. Okay, so as you've seen, the iPhone 6s is still a pretty good phone, even to this day. You get features even newer iPhones have, and since it is 5 years old, prices have dropped quite a lot, and I think it's one of the cheapest ways to get a respectable and supported iPhone in 2020 on an extreme budget, as long as you didn't consider the first gen SE, which is also pretty good and cheaper. I think if anyone is still using an iPhone 6s, that it will be alright to keep using if you can't upgrade. Having official support from Apple this year is even more exciting and means that you won't have to worry about any incompatibilities on the most popular apps that people use today. I think there are some things that truly do not hold up great in 2020, like the battery, the speakers, the microphone, but the iPhone 6s has the best quality where it matters: performance. The A9 has aged amazingly, and I think that it will age great even with iOS 14 this fall. Overall, the iPhone 6s is still a great iPhone in 2020, and if you have one, you shouldn't feel bad using it. It's still got some great specs, and I would have to give the 6s and 6s Plus an overall rating of 46.5 out of 70. It's not the best iPhone out there, but it still holds its ground in 2020. Since this is the first video of me doing a scoring system, I still need to add more phones to the scores to get a better idea as to how these phones compare, but as I do more reviews, I'll keep adding scores. Also, I'll add a link in the description for the phone scoreboard so you can keep track of each device.
So, the iPhone 6s is a success in my opinion, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you still use an iPhone 6s? How do you like it? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you liked what you saw, remember to like and subscribe to see more videos just like this. Thanks for watching!